A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to the Experts Talk webinar series hosted by Novel Office. My name is Manoj Nair and I'm the president of Novel Group. It's indeed a privilege and an honor for me to host this webinar today on behalf of Novel Group. Thanks for your phenomenal response. As of the last count, just before 11 a.m., we had a total of 518 registrations, and as we speak right now, the total number of attendees stand at 278. I'm sure this number will raise in the next few minutes' time. A brief introduction about Novel Group. Novel was incorporated in Dallas, Texas, United States of America in 1993 and commenced operations in India in Bangalore in 2003. We pioneered the advent of co-working model of business in India. We started off like a typical business center, co-working service provider, offering services to small and medium-sized customers with customer range of around 1 to 20 people. We introduced a fully customizable and flexible structure of office spaces, which today continues to be our unique selling point. Today, we can customize a 150 to 200 seater office space or more in just about 10 days' time. We offer a mix of services ranging from co-working to traditional leasing to business center to small and large serviced offices from 10 as low as 10 people to 2,000 people capacity. Our smallest patron is one seater customer whom we treat with the same amount of importance and reverence as the largest patron, who is over 2,000 seats. Present in 2 countries, 5 cities, our portfolio is about 1 million square feet in terms of space. So much for now. Let's move on. In the recent few months, the epicenter of all attention has been COVID-19. And I say that it's called COVID-19. Wow, what a phenomenon. It's impacted each and every one in this world in some form or the other. It will not be inappropriate for me to actually make a statement that COVID-19 has totally engineered a total redesign of mankind's evolutionary paths. We have all seen a series of events in the past few months which have not altogether been pleasant. In India, we were in a pretty fairly good condition a couple of months back, where the total number of cases were not as alarming as it was in the rest of the world. But today, we seem to have faltered, and we are not in a good position, having risen up to the number 4 position globally in terms of cases as well as mortality. Not something to be proud about. Of course, the overall population of our country and its density, topped by the genetic suboptimal hygiene of living conditions, possibly could be playing a major role in these spikes. But the fact is that we do have a problem, and experts believe that we are still seeing just the tip of the iceberg, and the real magnitude of the problem is yet to come. And all the state governments are groping with the intense challenge that has been thrown in front of us as a nation. The million-dollar question really is and continues to be and will continue to be, do we save lives or do we save livelihoods? But one, I guess. Lives are important. No one needs to debate that. However, the livelihoods are equally important. Basis this, the government was forced, I suppose, to strike a balance and walk the ice while doing so, and had to slowly, reluctantly, and with caution open up the lockdown. After all, one of the biggest victims of this entire process of COVID has been our economy. The economy is in doldrums, to say the least. Small, medium, large, and enterprise businesses are all badly impacted, and there does not even seem to be a of light. Seems to be a sustained potential. Of course, mankind will one day or the other, sooner than later, come up with a vaccine which will make it curable and preventable too, possibly. How long will it take? How affordable will the cure be? How many lives would COVID have taken by then? What was the devastation cost to the what was the devastation cost to the overall economy? Here, the Soviet Republic come out of this as a winner against COVID, or would we come back as a badly wounded soldier? How many MSMEs, SMEs, startups may have perished by then? These are questions which can only be answered in a speculative manner as of now. While I may have painted a tragic looking canvas in front of you, I would like to clarify that this was not the objective. I was only trying to take a reality check. The fact is that all is not hunky-dory as of now. There are serious challenges at an economic level today. Of course, clearly this is not the end of the world. Things will limp back to normalcy. Markets will bounce back. Economy will recover, and we will get back to the proverbial good old days. we all need to be positive and optimistic. And that's, I think, the bottom line. In order to boost the economy and revive the industry, the government has unleashed a slew of measures and schemes intended to, shall I say, reboot the market. And many of these schemes are relevant and aimed at the MSMEs, SMEs, and startups. 3.7 lakh crores liquidity infusion for MSME sector, which is around 63 million units pan India, employing 120 million people, contributing to 6% of manufacturing GDP and 24.63% of services GDP, a sector which cannot be overlooked at all. And in fact, in many ways, the government is looking at this sector's reboot for the overall economic revival. I do note that a very large number of our attendees and registered participants today for this webinar are business owners falling into this category. And we have gathered today to hear the views on this matter from the experts in this field. So let's move on to hear the hashtag experts talk on government support to reboot startups and MSME post-COVID, the way forward. To all the attendees, please note that some of you have already sent in questions along with the registrations, and we'll surely address those questions in the Q&A session along with the panelists. You have access to post questions now or anytime during the panelists address. Please shoot them as you deem fit. The entire exercise is meant to benefit to you from the knowledge and experience of these experts who are there on the panel. We will try to take up as many questions as possible in the Q&A session, which will follow the address by the panelists. So now let's move on to the main agenda of the webinar and hear the experts talk. Allow me to briefly introduce the three expert panelists for today. Mr. K.R. Sekar is a partner at Deloitte Haskins & Sells LLP, and he's also the Vice President at Bangalore Chamber of Industries and Commerce. Mr. F.R. Singhvi is the Joint Managing Director at Sincera Engineering Limited, and he also serves on many corporate boards and industry bodies. Mr. Ravi Gururaj is an incumbent President of TiE Bangalore Chapter. He's an angel investor in his own individual capacity and serves on board of many startups. I will introduce each of the panelists in greater detail as and when I call them to speak one by one. Our first speaker for today is Mr. K.R. Sekar. Sekar leads the private practice for Deloitte India. He has a very strong experience of advising companies throughout the entire business life cycle. His experience lies in working with clients in high growth sectors and emerging markets on their business strategy and tax advisory. In his previous role, Sekar led the global business practice for Deloitte India. Over the last 30 years, he has worked with a niche portfolio of clients in corporate and international taxation, inbound structuring, and controversy management. He's associated with many landmark litigation cases for the global companies. In addition to advising clients, Sekar is active in representing the government on various tax issues through the various industries at the chambers of commerce. He's a prolific writer, contributing regularly to tax journals and mainline papers, and has authored several books. Sekar is the Vice President of Bangalore Chamber of Industry and Commerce and set to lead this association next year. He is a member of the India Board of International Fiscal Association and also works closely with many other chambers, including NASSCOM. He is the founder director of International Tax Research and Analysis Foundation, a dedicated research body in the field of international tax. Sekar, it's indeed an honor and privilege to have you on our panel of experts. Over to you, Sekar. Sekar, unmute.
Good morning, Manoj. Good morning to everybody. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Thank you, Manoj, for giving this opportunity, and thank you. Good morning, participants, for this for joining this session. Indeed, it is a great privilege to address along with my good friend F.R. Singhvi and Ravi on this panel. Let me open up the topic on COVID. There is a lot of pessimism as well as a cautious optimism expressed on the recovery of the COVID. COVID is one of the kind where global has not witnessed in the last 50, 60 years, except the World War II. After the World War II, I don't think global has witnessed this kind of pandemic, which is impacting every part of our life, be it on personal life, be it the economy, or be it the corporate life. So it is impacting every one of our life in a very, very significant manner. And With the result, the point that always comes to every one of our mind is that what will happen post recovery of COVID, whether we'll have a recovery of COVID, and what will happen of the post recovery of COVID. Is it going to be a V shape? Is it going to be a U shape? Is it going to be a W? Which how the curve is going to be? That's one of the questions that keeps coming to every one of us. Now, before I go on to the government package or MSME sector, let me spend few minutes on the India side, which I always believe the advantages which India has got when it comes to recovery in the post-COVID scenario. Certainly, the India's population, the world's youngest population, is the greatest advantage that India has got. The market is a bigger market in India. It's definitely a great market in India. Third, the Indian economy is always a very vibrant, because whatever said and done, the agriculture is still backbone of the Indian economy. 29% of the Indian GDP is contributing from agriculture, and we're still depending on the agriculture to a greater extent. And we have got a very strong services sector. And with this kind of the demographic advantages that India has got, I'm very confident that India can emerge out of this recovery in a very successful manner. That I'm very confident about it. But having said that India has got a great chance of recovery, let me spend few minutes on the challenges of the industry and the business in the COVID situation, or the challenge that may arise in the post-COVID situation. The first challenge is that the supply chain will be severely impacted, because India's almost 30% of our imports is coming from China and the USA. With the result, the increase in the dollar rate is going to make the imports very costlier, and the supply chain is going to be very, very critical for India, and supply chain is also going to become costly. That's number one. Second, the entire, unfortunately in India in the last decade, fortunately in India in the last decade, we have seen a new segment that is coming up, what is called the urbanization of the rural areas. Now, in the COVID situation, the divide between the urban and rural will be very severe, and there's a lot of people who return back to the migrant labor, and a lot of people who return back to the villages and the native places, not sure what will be the state when they're coming back to the city or anything. With the result, you have more concentration of people in the rural areas, and there could be a challenges on the employment generation in the rural areas. So to that extent, the rural economy is very critical, or the recovery of the rural economy is very critical. The third challenge in India, to my mind, that challenge can be converted into an opportunity, is the infrastructure. We have infrastructure, but we need to improve our infrastructure in a very significant manner. Probably when I come a little bit later, what the government should, I'll touch upon that. And that is a challenge, but definitely that can be converted into an opportunity in the infrastructure. The fourth challenge is going to be on the paucity of the funds and paucity of the working capital. Certainly, that is the biggest hit for the industry and the corporates in the post-COVID scenario, because working capital facility is very less, and MSMEs or any business for that matter has been severely impacted by the working capital crisis. That's the fourth challenge. The fifth challenge is going to be on the lack of demand. Though India has got a largest market and very big population, a huge population, world's youngest population, the demand, lack of demand, or the lack of steps for the revive to revive the demand is going to hit us very badly. So the demand crisis is going to be challenges in the fifth one. The sixth one, for my purpose, limited purpose of analysis, which I will take it, is though technology sector is very good, it has given a significant contributor to the growth of the Indian economy. But there are equally other sectors like textile sector and the food processing sector is also important. But there's a lack of attention by the government on those food processing and the textile sectors, because those two sectors also contribute significantly to the growth of Indian economy in the post-COVID scenario. And how much the government is going to look at that particular sector is very, very important. So if I take these 6 steps, these 6 challenges, if you are able to address the government as well as every one of us able to address the 6 challenges in my view, then definitely the recovery from the post-COVID may not be a V shape, but at least can be a U shape. And more important, the healthcare infrastructure. When I talk about infrastructure, it is just not the physical infrastructure, but also other components of infrastructure like healthcare infrastructure and other infrastructure becomes very, very critical. So development of these infrastructure also becomes important. Now, when I take these six challenges, let me spend a few minutes on what the government has addressed so far and whether it is sufficient, whether it is little, whether it is good. Let us spend a few minutes on that, and then I'll go to the point what the government should do. The government unveiled a great package of 20 lakh crore on Atmanirbhar, which is called Self-Reliant India. Definitely, I appreciate the concept and I appreciate the thought the government has come out with that. But whether the point that before us is that whether the package of 20 lakh crore, is it in real or is it what we call, is it a number or is it a real, or it will be implemented at the ground level, number one. Two, what will be the impact of those Atmanirbhar package on the Indian economy, number two. And number three, more importantly for MSMEs, which is the most critical area today, whether the package, what is part of the government, is it sufficient to revive the MSME sectors? I'll just take those three questions and then I will address those three questions. The first one, as far as the 20 lakh crore of Atmanirbhar package, I have my own views on this 20 lakh crore of Atmanirbhar package. I made a desktop calculation. The 20 lakh crore of Atmanirbhar package includes some 8.5 lakh crore of RBI announcement before the announcement of Honorable Finance Minister. And that includes reduction in the rate of interest, reduction in the reverse rate, repo rate, and then giving a moratorium and various steps RBI has announced, which is around 8.5 lakh crore. The efficacy of that 8.5 lakh crore on the industry is not much because of multiple reasons. So therefore, I'm taking out that 8.5 lakh crore. Then the government has also announced the 50 lakh crore on what is called the reduction in the tax deducted at source rates, which means that the payments to the vendors, you can reduce the TDS rates, you can make a higher payment, and the government took a credit of 50 lakh crore on that side. 50,000 crore on that side. In my view, that cannot be taken as a credit for two reasons. Number one, the customers or the parties should have the cash to pay to the vendors, then only the question of payment of withholding tax would arise. When I'm struggling to make a payment to the vendors in the absence of a cash, a reduction in the rate of tax is not going to help me, number one. Two, even assuming that a reduction in the rate of tax is going to help, the other person who is receiving the amount still he has to pay taxes. Therefore, in the absence, without TDS, is going to make an advance tax payment. So what is collected, what is not collected by way of a tax deducted will get collected from the taxpayers in the form of an advance tax payment. Therefore, I would not consider that there is any relief to anybody. The more important point is that it is only a notional adjustment, not a real relief at the ground level. Therefore, I would not like to take it as a part of the 20 lakh crore. Now, the third one which the government made an announcement is about the Provident Fund reduction, where they said that we will reduce the Provident Fund for certain people, for less than 100 people, will compensate the Provident Fund, for which the government took a benefit of another 50,000 crore. Again, to my mind, it is a notional one. Yes, it is a good for certain people, but it is not coming such a sweeping relief. More than the Provident Fund relief, what is very important at this point of time and going forward is the introduction of the labor law reforms and speeding up of the labor law reforms. That needs to be focused, and to that extent, I am not so optimistic about the 50,000 crore in the Provident Fund, though it may help few people. Now, if I eliminate all these things, what came out to the balance was 10 lakh crores. In that 10 lakh crores, there is certain extra amount that is being contributed through way of Manrega, extra amount being contributed through way of what I would call food grain scheme and other scheme, subsidy scheme. These are already part of the government allocation in the normal budget, except for the fact that you increase the allocation. To what extent the increase in the allocation will result in Atmanirbhar, I have my own doubts at this point of time. Now, when we remove all these things, the way the 20 lakh crore, it's my analysis, the 20 lakh crore, the intent is good. The intent of developing a self-reliant India is great. But at the ground level, whether it is going to happen, whether it will change is a matter of a great debate, which I'm not so sure how effective it is going to be. That's point number one. Point number two, let me take the MSME sector, then I will go to the last point on other sectors, considering the time. Manoj, I'm sure I have another 5 minutes time, Manoj. Okay. Let me spend a few minutes on the MSME sector. In case of MSME sector, let me give a little bit of background about the MSME because that's much talked about it. If you go by the MSME Ministry of MSME annual report of 2018-19, as well as the UK Singhvi committee report appointed by RBI to look at what are the challenges of MSME sector on the lending side. Few important statistics before us. 51% of the MSMEs are in rural areas in India. They are not in urban areas. Second, the largest state that has got MSMEs are 5 largest states: Uttar Pradesh, which some of us may be surprised, Uttar Pradesh, West Bengal, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka. These are the 5 largest states for MSME. And Karnataka ranks the 4th in the manufacturing MSMEs. The second important statistics for the MSMEs are that MSMEs contributes almost 29% of the manufacturing GDP, 21% of the exports, and contribute significantly for the services economy. These are the 2 important statistics for the MSMEs. Now you come to UK Singhvi committee report on MSMEs. 3 challenges the UK Singhvi committee report said on the MSMEs for the credit. Number 1, the banking credit for the MSMEs to the normal formal banking channels is around 18% as per the UK Singhvi committee. Sorry, as per UK 23% is the banking credit. As per the Singhvi and the Chrysler report as of 31st December 2020, December 31st December 1919, the MSME's exposure to the banking sector is around 17%. As per the World Bank report on MSME's credit to the banking sector is around 16%. So anywhere, if I take all the 3 average of 3, it is between 16% to 20%. And that is what the MSME's exposure to the banking sector, formal banking sector. Most of the MSMEs survive on the informal lending, whether it can be from NBFCs or it will be from the private lending. Third, one of the big issues that was cropping about are the NPAs of the MSMEs, and therefore that is the issue. As per the UK Singhvi committee report and as per the Singhvi report, the MSMEs NPAs are hardly 16%, which is equivalent of any organized sector in India. With these 3 factors, UK Singhvi committee report pointed out 3 important recommendations. First recommendation, the MSME sector do not have any formal banking credit, particularly the rural MSMEs. The rural MSMEs do not have any formal banking credit. The rural MSMEs are significantly impacted due to the lack of banking credit. And I go back to the MSME ministry statistics, 51% of India's MSMEs are rural MSMEs. So rural MSMEs are completely out of the banking credit. That's the first challenge came from it, based on our report, and it recommended. The second one, the credit appraisal system of the banking sector towards the MSMEs is much still the old system, because the committee report recommended that the banking sector do not understand the MSME business, and with the result, the MSME business is still going through a multiple challenge on the banking sector, particularly on the credit appraisal and the credit sanctioning. That was recommended to be implemented, that was recommended to be much fastened up, or some more relaxation need to be given. The third important area, what UK Singhvi committee report said, that was MSME's largest receivables is just not from the government, but from the corporates. Most of the corporates owe money to MSMEs and they don't pay the receivables to MSMEs. With the result, MSMEs do not have the wherewithal to fight the corporates for the recovery of dues. So as per the MSME Act, you have what is called the MSME Facilitation Council, which is a not function. UK Singhvi committee report recommended to improve it faster. Now, with these recommendations, of course, you can see in our committee report also recommended the stressed fund as well as the debt fund, which has been floated by the government. With these recommendations, let's look at it, what the government came out with the package. The government came out with three packages. One, I would take four packages. 3 lakh crore for automatic credit for the MSMEs, 50,000 crore of a stress fund, and 20,000 crore for the debt fund. And there's a change in the MSME definition in these four. And in addition to that, there is one thing that has come up. It may not be for MSMEs, what is called a little bit of a more appealing to the common man. You have 50,000 crore for street vendors to a bank loan. Now, when I look at all these factors, the 3 lakh crore for the banking sector, automatic credit, it is not going to impact the MSMEs very significantly for only one reason. What the 3 lakh crore represents is only 18% of the MSMEs overall debt gap. MSMEs credit gap, as I explained, is around 73%, out of which only 30% represents the banking credit. The balance 53% goes from the informal banking credit. And the 3 lakh crore represents only 18% for the MSMEs credit. Second, even otherwise the amount is 18%, but the actual credit sanctioning by the banks of 3 lakh crore to the MSMEs is a matter of debate, because the banks do not give it automatically, though there is a provision, there has been a request, but there is no, unless it is mandated to the banks by the RBI that the 3 lakh crore should be given to the MSMEs as a part of a priority lending, then only the 3 lakh crore will see in the hands of the MSMEs. So MSMEs as a part of a priority lending, but there is a little bit of a distinction between the public sector bank lending and the private sector bank lending. Hence, there must be a clear mandate to that. The next two is about the 50,000 crore and the 20,000 crore for the stress fund and the debt fund. Though it is good, though it is welcome, but the challenge arises is that for the MSMEs, mere giving the money may not be sufficient at this point of time. What is required for the MSMEs is for the revival of the demand. MSMEs has got money. Unless the demand is revived, I cannot sell the goods to the end customer to whom I am going to buy. Unless the demand revived, MSMEs will not be able to sell the goods. There must be a demand revival. To revive the demand, to my mind, in addition to multiple factors, the government should do, at least for the MSMEs, the government should come out with two recommendations. For one, they should reduce the rate of GST on all the products, what is sold by MSMEs and what is procured by MSMEs, so that it becomes much better for the MSMEs to sell the goods. Number two, there must be an amendment to the MSME Act, which makes mandatory for all the corporates to pay off the receivables to MSMEs within a specific date from the end of the delivery of goods. Then only the MSMEs will get more cash. Now, unless these MSMEs are speeded up in a much better way, this sort of a package may not really deliver the goods to the MSMEs. And the last point before I hand it back to Manoj is about the other components of the Atmanirbhar package, like a coal sector, airport sector, aviation sector, and other sectors. Though these are all the good to talk about it. For example, more coal allocations, more coal blocks will be auctioned. Aviation sector, we are trying to revive by way of taking out some space from the restricted to the open space. More aviation sector, airports is going to talk about it. This is all very good to talk, but will it have an immediate impact on the common man, on the recovery of the industry? I have my own doubts, because each of the sector is fraught with their own issues in the respect to state government, stamp act, land availability, and various challenges, which I'm not getting onto detail. But what is very critical at this point of time is two, revival of demand. Second, making it mandatory on the part of the banks to push the surplus money into the companies and the industries, which will help them to have a cash flow. And the last important is improving the healthcare infrastructure, creating a more health infrastructure. And India always on one thing, whenever there is a recession, you can take it from 1980s. If you make a simple analysis, whenever there is a recession, improving a road infrastructure, improving a physical infrastructure will always create more industries and will always incentivize the job. And the government should do more focus on improving, creating the physical infrastructure. The only one statistic which I want to give it, and before I hand it over to Manoj, as per the government own admission, as per the government own targets, we have to connect at least 10,000 villages per annum to the by physical infrastructure. But what has been achieved is only 5,000 villages per annum, and Haryana ranked better as per the government own statistics. So we have more than 2 lakh villages in India, and if you are able to connect with an ambitious plan of 8 to 10,000 villages per annum, at least the physical infrastructure will crop up. Moment we have a more physical infrastructure, we can have better growth for MSMEs, as well as into the cement and steel sector, as well as we can create a rural employment. These are my opening remarks, and I'm handing it back to Manoj. Back to you, Manoj.
Thank you very much, Sekar, for a very interesting way of presenting the entire government package. There is, of course, a lot of apprehension in the MSME and startup community about how well are these government measures going to roll out. And there is a lot of perceived feelings that things like these TDS packages, things like the PF rollout plan, are they a mere eyewash, or is it really going to impact and help the revival of this industry of the sector? So thank you very much for this. There are some of the questions you've already answered, and I'm sure there are more questions coming in. All right. Thank you very much for your views, Sekar. Our next speaker for today is Mr. FR Singhvi. FR, as he's popularly known, is the Joint Managing Director at Sansera Engineering Limited, an engineering company manufacturing precision machined and forged components for the auto and aerospace sector, having its operations across India and Sweden. FR is currently the chairman of Pillar 3 of ACMA, overseeing the activities of ACT, ASDC, HR, and YBLF. He is an All India rank holder of the Institute of Chartered Accountants. He's also founded one of the top chartered accountancy firms in Bangalore, namely Singhvi Devanunni. FR also serves on many world-class manufacturing companies' boards. On the social front, FR manages Sansera Foundation, which is involved in improving the lives of over 5,000 children, studying in about 28 government schools. He's also involved in initiatives of lake development, tree planting, free artificial limb donations for the needy, and also runs a dialysis center for the poor and the needy. He's also an advisor to the Bhagavan Mahavir Jain Hospital, a charitable hospital. FR, as a member of Rotary, is involved in a project called Mansi, recognized by WHO in providing treatment to the depressed women in over 200 villages in rural Bangalore, and is expected to be launched in different parts of the world very soon. Ladies and gentlemen, presenting to you our speaker number 2, Mr. FR Singhvi. FR, you're on mute.
Thanks, Manoj, for the opportunity and the introduction, and thanks, Sekar, for doing most of the job of today's topic subject as such. So I don't have to really cover. He not only covered what post-COVID, he also covered pre-COVID. That's the sign of a good consultant. So let me. I mean,
FR, sorry to interrupt.
I'm not able to hear you. Sorry.
Tell me again. Wonderful to hear from you from the industry perspective. Apart from being on many industry bodies, you also run a very successful enterprise called Sansera Engineering. Do bring a flavor of that front, please.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk more of practical aspect of our life as a micro, small, and medium scale industry as to what we go. So believe me, ladies and gentlemen, I have gone through this journey. I'm associated. I'm in part of Sansera group. We started with the initial capital of 1,13,000 from my promoter partner, and 37,000 from my promoter partner, and 1,13,000 from KSFC. So that's how small the Sansera started. So you can understand the pain and agony that I have witnessed it and experienced it, like sitting in front of a bank manager, waiting for my check to come, where he has to take a decision to honor it or dishonor it because there's no bank balance, and go at the right moment so that looking at your face, he doesn't dishonor the check for a sum of 5,000 rupees and 8,000 rupees. And doing that continuously for 3 to 6 months when situations like this arise is something that, I know it's so difficult. But let me also tell you that today when I think back, these are my proudest moments, that in these kind of difficulties that we were able to manage, there were people to support, and you found new ideas, new ways of doing it, and that you withstood that problem and came out flying. And so I'm sure that this COVID journey that has started is not short term, it is long term, but this is also a time where one looks at and analyze, and lockdown has given us enough time to pause, reassess ourselves, re-look at our life, look at the kind of speed that we are going, and look at it to the things that we're jumping into and see whether what is required going forward. So this is something that one has to really look at, that re-look at what you're doing, what was happening with you, what is the kind of business that you're chasing, manufacturing that you're doing, the process you're following, and see how to do it with limited resources. Stay alive till this situation of your capacity gets filled up. And that is what one should do. So I know that government, to me, MSME people are like the soldiers of the country. We all applaud soldiers. They do a great job on the boundaries, but nobody applauds the soldiers within the country, creating employment for a huge number of people. Even as, I mean, the smallest of small companies exporting is a national pride, but it's all not considered. And what really happens, like Sekar said, despite having all the laws on our side as a small scale industry to get payment on time, most of the company or the supplier customers don't pay on time. The government who creates a law doesn't pay on time. Mr. Nitin Gadkari announced the figure 5 lakh crores is due to small scale industries, SMEs by the government itself. So this is being the situation that we don't get what is promised by law. And with that adverse situation, you have to really carry on. Most of the innovation, the real genuine entrepreneur who completes the college and is looking at a job in a company and have a safe employment, takes all there is to start manufacturing requires guts. Unfortunately, it's becoming a dying breed because the kind of support that manufacturing companies get by way of infrastructure, by way of government policies is so difficult. I mean, it was easy for a person like me to get into industry where a technology partner was there. But there are most of the MSME owners, promoters, they are their own engineers, their own chartered accountants, their own labor consultants, their own advocates, and the PR working with the government. You're all in one, and that's a huge challenge going forward. So I salute all of you being in this MSME sector, but I would also say that this is a sector where you should put in efforts, and you have huge potential opportunities to really move forward. And now the limit has been raised to 250 crores of turnover, which I think is a good move. That a lot of concession which are there, at least legally you are entitled to it. How much difficulty it would be to get it is a different issue. So then Sekar pointed out that more than the reforms, like you see, it is 3 lakh crores. From what I know from the newspaper report till date, 31st June, they've sanctioned 40,000 crores and disbursed 21,000 crores. So hopefully the government this time would not be as slow as they would normally be in the normal circumstances. So they've already passed the law regarding 50,000 equity. Maybe Ravi would talk more about it. And so the things are moving, but are they really going to serve the purpose? To me, it doesn't. It only creates more debt and makes it more difficult for you to survive. And ultimately, you may not, many of them will not be able to pay. Government will still lose the money. So on one side, government is given a money which they ultimately lose. They have not given you the money which you really require So to me, I would say what government could do even now, if they've not done it so far, doesn't mean that they can't do it. If the government could consider that, you've lost 2 months of lockdown. The government has not given any mandate on the employers or employees on the salary cut. And so what's happening? That there are issues going on between the employer and employees on salary cut. Many of the unions and workers are not willing to agree. And They have a valid reason not to agree because they pay so much less that they can't survive. So they would object. But in a situation like this, the clarity of government would have been better, saying that, okay, first choice I would have said government would pay 50% of the salary for these 2 months or 3 months. Thereby, what is happening is the reserve cash that small scale industry had before COVID is not depleted because of the salary payment during the period when he was forced to lockdown. And 50% would have been sufficient enough for an employee to take care because there was no extra cost to some extent. Some fixed cost would have been done. The second would have been that you pay the interest for 2 months. The government would pay interest on the loan for 2 months. So what would happen by these two is your liquidity was kept intact by the government by meeting two fixed costs. And thereby then this extra loan debt to that extent was not necessary because your funding of 2 months of interest cost this is done. Your liquidity is same as before pre-COVID. And the government by doing this would have reduced the chance of people being unemployed. Small scale industry is going into bankruptcy because many of the industry, like Sekar said, they don't come under the banking reforms. So what happens to them? They are not going to get this part of 3 lakh crores or 50,000 crores. So those industries also would have survived because their cash was kept intact. And the third, like again, Sekar said about the demand crisis, that is the real crux of the situation, not only for small scale and medium scale, it is to all of us, is the demand. And today, in the current scenario of COVID, where every day in the newspaper you read COVID numbers going up, virus increasing, and there is no option but to continue and no lockdown. One believes that virus will come into 1.5 to 2 years. But did the virus come for SARS? Did the virus, antiviral medicines, whatever vaccination that you call it, did it come for SARS? Did it come for AIDS? So if they can't do it for those, how I have my own doubts whether what would be the result of vaccine for this. Anyway, I hope it comes. So this is a part of the life that we have to go on today, that government will do its best effort. We'll follow all the methods, guidance given for COVID, but we have to also carry on our life, sustain and survive. So cash flow demand becomes very important. So as far as demand is concerned, what I would expect government to do, government is today, I'm in auto sector, we have did 20% business turnover last year, which actually is not a sale, it's a production. This year we have got scheduled for 50%. So government, when you look at the average GST collection of the government today, would not be more than 30 to 40% or 50% of the sales, which is about 50,000 crores by the collection they were doing in the normal course. So if Sekar suggested, that micro SME turnover be subjected to lower GST. To me, most of the MSME turnover goes to business. So B2B, the GST reduction will not really help in a big way. It also involves a lot of legislative changes and amendment with so many states involved. It is practically not possible. But look at the situation of iPhone if you buy today through a credit card. You get a direct credit of 7,000 rupees to your bank account. I do know that many of the companies don't have credit facilities, but I think almost everybody has banking account today, or they have Google account, or a PayPal account, or Paytm account. So Indians are connected to this. So just imagine if government were to say that we will provide you GST refund on your purchases for next 3 months by way of 30% of GST or 50% of the GST. If you look at the current sale, government would have lost about 1 lakh crores over a period of 3 months. But if you were to create this incentive, people like you and others who still have liquidity who have got plans to purchase, you will rush and buy it. So on one side, the sales, instead of happening 50%, will probably happen to 70, 80%. And the government giving refund of 30% really goes out because of increased sales. The government does net government still gets at 50,000 crores, which it would have got. So what would really happen is by giving this incentive, you are actually you're pushing people to go and buy. You are also changing the environment of people being all the time in COVID mind. And this would have really resulted in increased sales. So 1 lakh crore package of GST refund or 1.5 lakh crore of GST refund would be far better than talking about 20 lakh crores benefit, 20 lakh crore packages. So this is the kind of stimulus. If the salary account is taken, it would not have probably been another 1 lakh crore. So because when government is giving guarantee of 90% of defaults of 3 lakh crores of 50,000 crore capital, that is 3.5 lakh crores, 90% government is to pay, the SMEs don't pay. That means government is prepared to lose 3 lakh crores eventually. Instead of that, had they given money now in the form of direct stimulus by way of GST, interest payment, salary payment, this would have created back the money to the government by way of better economy going in a very short period. This all V-based or U-based, you would be probably somewhere in the middle. So this is what I would say, that the government should have, it's not too late, government should still consider, instead of giving loan, automatic loan, is give automatic salary. And no change is required, because under ESI, when a person is on leave, sick leave, the salary is paid by the government. So this is nothing different than this. This is also, lockdown was also because of health issues. It is covered. So you don't have to really create infrastructure. Infrastructure already is available. It doesn't go to large companies because most of the large company employees are not under ESI. So it was not something that the government could not do. Like if Citibank, Apple can be sold and credit can be given through credit card, this was also again a system which is already existing. So I really see that this is something that the government should do. Now forget the government. Government, to me, government is also not in really very good shape. They have their own problems. We are a huge population, young population, and government has to do a lot more. And last 2 years before COVID also was not really good. So the economy was actually going down. I would today, let's say, I would put the MSMEs to be like the children of the migrant workers. Government is like the migrant worker today, practically with no resources, no choices. And it is trying to do its best, borrow money, whatever, so that the children can be educated. So I would not really depend much on the government. I would not blame the government for the situation we are in. We cannot be comparing to developed nation and say they could do this, why can't we do it? So I would accept the position as it is and see what can I do. So if you look at, government has now announced that below 200 crores tenders of e-commerce of the government purchases will not be allowed to foreign companies. That's a place where, though it's not just to MSME, but it's an area where MSME and in tenders, the government, they want the lowest prices. I can tell you that as a company, I cannot compete with government tenders. I will never be able to win it against the MSMEs who are more cost effective, who run their company with very frugal costs, and therefore they will be able to be in a better position to win most of the e-tenders that the government is now talking about. Second, this wave of China purchases, China imports is coming. As an individual, I would believe that these are all more emotional. It's not practical. It will not happen. But it is not that it will not happen to anything at all. So let's say that we import about electronics and new engineering products. Yes, we cannot immediately replace China and become cost competitive, even some of our automotive parts. But there are so many parts, like the toys, the PPE material that now the government brought in, and there are more than, I think, we are self-sufficient today on COVID material to a large extent, PPE being supplied by Indian companies. So I'm saying that with this wave of government wanting to restrict China trade, which they were earlier aware of, but nothing serious was being done. Because like in case of my company, my product, I can easily export to China. I'm more cost effective. My quality is better. China wants it, but they wanted us to set up unit in China. And for which but there is no corresponding rule like this, that the government wants the imports of China with a similar condition that my company was being imposed by Chinese government. This was happening. So I hope this change will happen. If that happens, let's say about 20% of the products of China we can locally make it, and people also prefer to buy the local product. Governments looks at and see how to reduce the cost of these products by looking at the gap analysis between China and India and see how do we reduce the cost. Government keeps saying we'll create an environment for you to export. For export, you need quality which an entrepreneur can give. But as far as cost is concerned, as an entrepreneur, I have a limitation. I can control my own internal cost, but can I control external cost? Like power, for example, the land cost are issues. I have to keep a backup generator. I have to keep a backup generator, and backup generator. I have to keep a battery backup. So all these are because of the government issues. So government should work out that how do we reduce the cost of industry where they are running in a most optimized, efficient manner. But we have to bring in that wherever we are not efficient compared to global standard, we bring down the rates. Like today, power rates. I mean, today with solar power, we are able to generate power at 4 rupees, 4 rupees 50 paisa, even 3 rupees 70 paisa. But can a small scale industry get that power at 3 rupees 70 paisa? No, they have to buy only from the government, which is at 7 rupee and 7 rupee 50 paisa. So why can't government say, irrespective, it is our inefficiency of distribution or cost, we will provide power to all the industrial unit at global rates. If the global rate is 4 rupees a unit, we will provide you at 4 rupees a unit. That will make us cost competitive. Small scale industries have proven that they're 40% of their product is exported. So I don't see any reason that we cannot create this 40% to be more if we become cost competitive, which is not there because of government reason. It could be GST rates reduction, it could be power tariff, it could be easy allotment of land. I can go on. So this is what I would say, that we have to now use the government sentiments on Chinese products, going global and trying to see what we can do with our own sources. And I'm sure government also will realize the problem and they would work on it. And the third and the last I would say is, you can't depend on the government, depend on your own self, depend on your all stakeholders, be it your employees, be it your customers, be it your current financiers. Please build up that understanding, communication, work as a team and see how you can help out each other and try to bring it innovative methods to get more business. I mean, it is not just that India is affected. A lot of other countries have been affected. And let me tell you that a small scale industry in other countries, they will get government relief, but they will not get social support. They will not get family support, which you can get. So there are even today opportunities available that you can get new business of the units which are closing down abroad, and you would be able to get that business. So there are going to be, unfortunately, some units will close down within your vicinity, in your neighborhood, or in your product, and those are the challenge. Those are the opportunities that you will have to grab it and see that how you can increase your business by creating new market, by adding similar products from the same customers, or adding new products with the new customers or existing customer. So you have to fight your own battle as well. Don't really depend on banking, government, they're most welcome, but work through your association. Try to see that if you have a problem with a manager going strictly by his own norms, not really going to the intention of the government to support you, please don't hesitate taking association help. Make them talk, make them use their weight, and try to get what is best, which is eligible to you. So here today, the government's policies should be more with the intention to help rather than following the book rules. And I do understand from the government that they have taken up to task some of the banks for not being going easy on the packages. So I would just conclude by saying that we are in a battle to survive, and we are all true entrepreneurs of the country, and we should not think negative about our capabilities. Be very positive. This is the time to show your mental and strength and come out flying. Thank you.
Thank you, FR, for your kind words. Indeed, these are quite testing times, to say the least. I specifically appreciate your words of encouragement and advice to the MSME owners. And it was interesting to see the ideas of how, instead of just doling out packages as loans, eventually most of the measures that have been announced by the government right now as released for MSME, smaller communities and smaller businesses, are all basically loans. At the end of the day, it's debt structured in various forms. And debt is only going to be something that you're going to pay back. Some of the incentives that you talked about of how, salaries compensation, interest compensation, GST incentivization, which itself will be a big demand generation, very interesting to note, FR. Most importantly, I think, ladies and gentlemen, I think the message that coming across is stay positive, don't get negative. It is something that it's a testing times wherein we have to tide over the current problems because there will be a rainy day after that. And so basically keep yourself fit and swimming till then. Thank you very much, FR, for your kind words. We move on to our next speaker for the day, Mr. Ravi Gururaj. Ravi is the founder and CEO of QuickPod.com, wherein he has built an innovative last mile logistics solution for the e-commerce industry. As a technology entrepreneur, he has previously founded 5 startups, 2 of which have exited successfully to public NASDAQ companies. Ravi is currently the incumbent president of Thai Bangalore chapter. He serves on the Indian Venture Capital Association VC Council. He is a chief mentor at Reliance Industries Gen Next program. He serves on the startup councils for the government of Karnataka and CII. He's a co-chair of the Penn and Wharton Club of Bangalore and HBS Alumni Angels India, and has served for 3 terms on NASSCOM's Executive Council. Ravi is personally and at his individual level has angel invested into more than 25 innovative startups, and over his career has held senior executive roles in global technology firms like Citrix, Trilogy, and Intel. Ravi is an MBA graduate with high distinction, a Baker Scholar from Harvard Business School. He graduated with honors as Benjamin Franklin Scholar from University of Pennsylvania in the Jerome Fisher Program in Management and Technology. He was also an exchange scholar at the University of Edinburgh and schooled at Lamart Boys in Kolkata. It's a pleasure to have you over for our webinar, Ravi. Look forward to hearing from you. Over to you. Please unmute. Yeah. Ravi, you need to unmute. Ravi, can you unmute?
I am unmuted, I think. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, Manoj, and thank you to the Novell team for inviting us to this webinar. I have the unenvious task of going after 2 illustrious co-panelists. Thank you, Sekar and FR, for setting the stage. I think you all have covered everything in the last 45 minutes that I had to say. But so let me take a slightly different tack, right? In terms of my comments, so we can enter into a robust half hour of discussion. I think there's a good reason the Prime Minister Modi, named his whole program overall Atmanirbhar, right, which is self-reliance. I think we should not expect the government to solve this problem overall. I think this jives well with what FR was also saying, and I think to some extent what Sekar's frustrations were with some of the programs, and I think where he was indicating as well. I think fundamentally, if you look at the equation, one is all the receipts that are funding the government are also in stress. Second, let's just take the 2 months of lockup. I was talking to some MSME owners, and they said, first, our top line went to 0 for 2.5 months. Our fundamental costs are land, labor, human capital, and all of that stayed fixed, and we were forced to pay. So, and my net margins are in the 10%, let's say, range. So to recover just those 2 months will take me almost 1.5 to 2 years if everything came back to normal right after the 2 months. Now you're telling me nothing is coming back to normal for another 1.5 years, possibly. So the demand side of things are going to be very slow. Even if I, as an MSME, can supply, if there's nobody to buy, or if there's depressed buying, and my minimum viable production capacity is not being used, it is going to be trouble going forward, right? So I think that's the reality of the numbers. One is, you heard already how the GST is down massively. You look at the reality of the math of MSMEs, and then we come to startups. Startups fall into kind of 2 or 3 categories, but either they're startups that have big top lines, haven't really reached profitability yet, and are trying to grow the market to kind of build a big consumer base or a market share. That now has come ground to a halt for many startups, because while a few are still able to do digital commerce and pure offline, uh, pure online, many were reliant on either touch of some kind, physical access of some kind, or were in categories that were now are being deemed, optional by the consumer from a consumption perspective, right? So that leads to a set of issues there for those startups. The second type of startup is one that has not even got a top line yet, or is just in the process of growing it, right? Uh, and it's a very different, I think, profile than maybe a regular MSME. I would categorize a regular MSME as one that's been in business for many years, has got a steady state of scale, has a steady set of customers, is growing in single digits at most. And I know there are exceptions to everything. I'm just categorizing the average profile, and has a good set of metrics around their numbers, and they have been disrupted. Startups, on the other hand, have been disrupted much worse because they didn't have a top line. They were building for the future, a future that is completely uncertain now. I think that is the key thing. Self-reliance on the top and absolute uncertainty. We don't know when a vaccine will come. And I think this is probably what has guided the government. If you're going into a battle, you have 100 bullets to shoot. If you shoot 99 of them on the first day, what's going to happen? So I think their strategy has been, given this might be many months, many quarters, there may be a lot of pain, there may be a lot of need for the government to assist over a long period of time. And given the visibility we have in predicting that demand will go down, as a result, tax receipts will go down, health costs are going to go up astronomically, and the recovery period is going to be long. I think, there's a reality to what the government has done, which is said, if I fire all my bullets on day one, we don't have the $6 trillion the United States has pumped into the market, or at least is trying to pump into the market in the US. We don't have necessarily the resilience Germany has, because we have a huge bottom of the pyramid. Don't forget, we saw the scenes of the migrants trying to go home. We can see in cities which are massively impacted by COVID now, the health infrastructure crisis there is, right? So I think, the government, in one sense, just to defend the thinking, I think probably prudent in trying to spread their resources out and not fire all bullets on day one, right? I think that's going to be key, because we're going to have to think through this over a long period of time. I think fundamentally, the silver lining to this, I hope, and even the crisis on the border, is that self-reliance, we come together with an infrastructure package for self-reliance. And I think this was already mentioned earlier. You can't build self-reliance overnight. There's almost no point in saying, let's delete all Chinese apps and let's delete all Chinese inputs. The whole world is now intermeshed. Actually trying to do that will probably raise costs for the bottom of the pyramid. After all, the top of the pyramid will import it from somewhere in Europe or whatever and continue. They'll pay premium for even second-hand items. Cheap goods, cheap inputs actually benefit the bottom of the pyramid to a large extent. And, so you have to be careful about what you do in the near term during this scenario. So I think there too, we will see very measured actions, right? Where the government will have to not get emotion ahead of itself. We have to be really smart now as a country to figure out how we build that infrastructure over a very, concerted, planned period. Forget about the old 5-year plans. We need a huge new 5-year self-reliance plan, right? And it's going to take approximately that much time. But if we plan it well, and I think there were some indications from both FR and Sekar about how we might give the right incentives to create that infrastructure among MSMEs, among the larger companies, right? As we build out, we have to look at each of the inputs that go into our economy that we are importing, right? And figure out which ones we want to continue importing from, where we will have supply chain resilience and alternative sourcing solutions, where we will have deep dependence, because the world is completely interconnected on supply chain. And let's not kid ourselves. Many industries won't even survive if certain nut and bolts don't come in in time. And Even a single nut and bolt might prevent a large machine that may be otherwise fully ready from going into market, right? And the last thing you need at this point is quality issues, when we actually need to improve that to a global level, right? So I think this is going to take a very concerted effort, right? I think capital also will be constrained, and we need to figure out how we support the companies that will survive. I think we have to be realistic here. It may be a period of cleansing. Not only do we need hygiene in health and in the personal and the environment, but we may need some business cleansing also. And this may be the opportunity where we all rethink. There may have been a lot of businesses that were surviving somehow on very low margins, managing through almost sweat equity that was being put in by the promoter and their families, eking out a living, right? And that may not be a process of that you want to push forward. I think the issue has been raised, which is most MSMEs, most young companies, smaller companies extend huge amounts of credits to all their customers. And in India, generally, the payment terms are both very nebulous, payment cycles are very long, and a big tax is extracted before the payment is released, right? Both in time, in fatigue. This is the time when you can't fatigue these MSMEs. They need the capital. In fact, if everybody just paid everything that was owed, rightfully owed, let's say, okay, to every MSME, that itself would be a boost. It would give them the little bit of the urgent liquidity. It wouldn't involve the government having to do anything in terms of its exchequer. It would allow the MSMEs to then maybe reinvest in maybe a scaled down business, but a more realistic way, right? I think, listen, if I were an MSME owner today, I would be scared. Why would I put a rupee into the ground now to do any capex when there's so much uncertainty around, right? And you would be risking your family's livelihood and potentially your life too, right? So I think, I don't want to paint a dire situation, but I think, unfortunately, we've got to live with this COVID. I think the government upfront made a very, in some sense, a measured decision that COVID is probably not going to go away for 2 years, the impacts of it, economic impacts of it. Whatever we do, we can do something that is a vanity measure upfront. And I think a little bit of that is probably done. And I think Sekar pulled it apart in terms of what is vanity, what is reality, right? In some of the metrics. But I think, the government is really saving its bullets for the long term, right? In terms of getting the cash out in a phased way. I think, there is still the risk, even when businesses open. Don't forget, these are small businesses. We need to help them to the extent that all the SOPs, the measures that the government is putting in place, maybe that's one area where we can help them. Their employees themselves have run off to all kinds of places. Every MSME owner I talk to, it's still hard for them to reopen their business because a lot of labor has not come back. Sometimes these factories didn't have a lot of people on the bench that they could just say, I can put this person to do that job. A shop floor needs every employee, and they probably already were understaffed to begin with. Even if 20% ran away, it's very hard to do the entire manufacturing process if some key people aren't there, right? That's often an issue too. And those skills are not easily trainable right away. Labor, just raw labor, maybe you can replace with a little bit of premium. But I think skilled shop floor people, all of that is very important. There's a lot of inherent talent there. A lot of our MSMEs are labor intensive, not robotics intensive, not machinery intensive, right? So that's very hard. So I think we need to figure out how to bring back those workers, give them some programs to make them feel comfortable. Maybe we need to ensure some, if it's camps, I don't know what. Honestly, it's hard to tell, but I'm sure there are others that can come up with plans for even housing, temporary housing that makes those workers comfortable to come back. We may need to open trains up in the other direction from where the labor have gone to coming back to manufacturing centers, right? In a way that is safe. We need to obviously improve the testing and all of that. I think physical access to plants is to start to kickstart the supply side. Then I think we will have ultimate issues on the demand side. Fundamentally, you can have a lot of inventory or something, but if nobody's walking into the shop to buy, very quickly your desire to supply will go down to zero, right? And So that is going to be a big problem. And I think demand, until we get some confidence into customers, into consumers, corporates also, it's all linked, right? The whole world is interlinked. So on the top of the stack is ultimately the consumer for every business. And if that consumer is saying, whatever other than pure essentials, I will delay because of the uncertainty, till, if it's an air conditioner, if it's a fridge, whatever it is, right? Even if it's books, anything that is delayable, you will delay. Anything that is, nice to have, you will not buy now or even consider. That becomes a cascading and a, kind of a spiral, that is downward spiral, right? I think we need to figure out how to arrest that to some extent. And there we may need to give some injections of capital at the top of the consumption cycle. I know some people will say that's inflationary, but it may be necessary to support the demand side too, because ultimately, if you don't have demand, I don't know what good it does to fix the supply chain, fix the supply side, right? We will need to inject that. I think, just to address a few of the things on the startup side, I think, startups luckily are inherently built for failure. Let me say what I mean by that. What I mean by that is they already inherently have in the equation that their mortality rate is quite high, right? So little different than MSME, let's say, in that sense, right? An MSME is really, it's oftentimes the business that's keeping the family alive. A startup is oftentimes, while it does keep the family alive eventually, in the initial years is oftentimes a big bet the whole family is taking, right? A known bet. It is made with some boundaries that allow the startup founder to jump in, knowing full well that there's a 9 in 10 chance in the first 3 years they will fail. And they already have in that calculus what happens when I fail, right? To some extent. Either they built the risk mentally into their mindset, or they built the risk into their financial model, personal financial model, right? So I think that calculus has also gone into the equation with the government, where they have said, first, job creation is massive on the MSME side. It's a little bit more nebulous on the startup side. I think also the resilience factor and the mental mindset is a little different on both sides, right? And I think also adaptability. Oftentimes, startups can adapt, they can pivot into new things much easier than maybe an MSME can, right? An MSME has plants, he has people, he has a location, he has given customers. They're not necessarily a digital enterprise, right? Yet. So they have less flexibility to just say, instead of manufacturing soap, I'll go do something else, right? And so it's a little harder, but maybe startups have a little bit more adaptability, a little more agility, and then do than regular MSMEs, right? So I think fundamentally, as entrepreneurs, as founders of companies, as promoters, we just now need to be, self-reliant. We need to, as was being said earlier, we can't really hope the government is going to come and bail us out 100%. Okay, I think we got to just think through the next few months. We got to plan for, I think, probably 15 months at least, because even if there's a vaccine, to get it to 1 billion and 0.3 people, whatever you do the math, even if you do 100 million a month, at the rate of 3-4 million a day, we're not even able to do testing yet at that, right? Think about what the scale of India, right? So even to achieve so-called herd immunity, which they keep saying, at least the experts seem to predict is about 70-80% of the population, it's still 1 billion people, right? So assuming a vaccine comes by the end of the year or early next year, it might still be a year before the country is really safe, right? And everybody feels safe. So I think, we've just got to have, I think, self-resilience. We've got to just move forward. We've got to learn to live with this. There's going to be some risks because there's no 100% guarantee of anything, unfortunately. And this has been the most unpredictable period, like I think Sekar said, since the beginning of last century. Practically, even the world wars were well known. You know who you were fighting. You know when you died. You know who else was beside you and shooting. Here, you don't know anything. You don't even know who's sick and who was sick and who may be getting you sick and what you touch that may get you sick, right? And then you know nothing about the consumer buying, and you know nothing about how you're going to get your next dollar of revenue, right? and how long that's going to survive till the next lockdown comes. And we may well have more lockdowns. The government may have no choice but to safeguard lives in the end, even at the cost of a little bit of livelihood, right? Because the choice may be, if you don't do it, you lose so many lives, there's no livelihood anyway, okay? So in a country like India with the density we have, all of that. So I think, fundamentally, we've just got to be adaptable, take some risks, try and open up to the measure we can. I think businesses now start to think about operating in these measures and do what you can to survive. I think, there will be huge pains. I don't think there's any croson, anybody's got no government in the world today to relieve this pain, right? Unfortunately. So you got to live with this pain going forward. I hope, in this process, people are empathetic too, because I think that's going to be very important. And it's not necessarily that, we have to take from the rich to give to the poor or something like that. That I think the rich should give to the poor regardless. And that should be part of the equation here. But there's just not, we just need to be empathetic in situations where we see a lot of pain, a lot of struggle, right? And try and help in whatever way we can. There's lots going on in the startup ecosystem. I don't know if you all have heard of the ACT fund that has been set up in Bangalore and across the nation. Some of the top founders and venture capital firms have come together to fund solutions that help target this crisis, to help bring alleviation and help bring even solutions. And that's a very good measure. And it's done completely privately, literally in a matter of days. They started to fund the first initiatives and distribute. I think we need to see more such initiatives and scale those up, and where even the government is handing off to enterprising private industry folks resources to make this happen faster, because I think government can be helped too, and they can help accelerate, right? So, and I think people are willing to sign up to do that. I think finally, plan for the worst and hope for the best. I hope vaccine comes quickly. Luckily, India is a hub, a global hub for manufacturing vaccines. So I think that's the good news. If we do need to get 1 billion out, luckily we're in a situation where we can manufacture a good chunk of the vaccines we need ourselves, right? In the meantime, we have to be safe. I think this is one area where maybe the government can step up even more and really mandate safety measures in a way that's maybe viewed as draconian, but better than a lockdown. It's better to be safe and enforce safety than enforce another lockdown, right? Which is then inevitable if we're not all as a community, looking out for each other's safety. I honestly, Sekar and FK covered everything before this. I think most of the measures have been focused on MSMEs, have been focused on delaying deadlines of various kinds, kind of providing some relief from regulatory filings and things like that. But for startups, there's been some measures. There's funding that's coming through fund of funds of various kinds. But I think startups have to be self-resilient and self-reliant now going forward, and hopefully their investors will find interesting ways to bridge them through this crisis, right? I think hopefully customers, in some sense, revenue, and investors bridging where they're building products that have a long-term future. So those are my comments for now. I think we can probably jump into Q&A after that, Manoj.
Hey, thank you, Ravi. It was interesting to hear your perspective. You have an immense amount of experience in the startup ecosystem. So generically, the sentiments coming from all the three speakers I can see are that the things are tough. And like the proverbial saying, when going gets tough, the tough should get going. This could be a reality check for us to look at how whether we can actually shed some weight, become, like Ravi said, cleanse your business in some form, and make sure that we're not carrying dead wood. The whole perspective seems to be that how do we stay alive as an organization till things come back to BAU. And an interesting comment that Ravi made is that the startups are as a concept, from a mindset perspective, are ready for a failure. In the sense, it's quite often that you see that a startup says, right, I'm funded now for the next 12 months. I'm funded now for the next 18 months, which means that if he doesn't get the next round of funding for after 12 months, he may actually perish. Okay, so maybe all as business owners, MSMEs, and the various manufacturing sectors should start thinking. Our mindset should change a little bit. We should become nimble-footed. We should become agile. We should become a little more transient to start thinking in the direction of like, all right, now let's not bother about how I'm going to do in the next 10 years time. Let me put a milestone for about 6 months time or 3 months time or 1 year's time. Let me stay afloat. And that should be the generic approach, which seems to be the way that all the speakers are talking about. Thank you, Ravi. Let's move on to the Q&A. There have been pouring questions while the seminar has been going on, but there were a few which came in earlier to the seminar starting, and I'd like to start with some of them first. The first question is from Mr. Ravi Shankar from Data Point Services. It's quite often that the government, Sekar, I would like you to take this question. It's quite often in some form you've covered this in your address, and maybe quickly you can summarize it. It's quite often that the government announces grandiose plans, and equally often that the reliefs coming down to the end beneficiary, say my company, is neither adequate in terms of quantum, nor does it come in a timely manner. How do you think the COVID reliefs under the ACT scheme would be any different? Is the governance structure and relief delivery mechanism any different from the normally announced government plans? Sekar?
Yeah, thanks, Manoj. Certainly, the government intent, I'll just make it very clear, the intent to deliver the results in this COVID packages are far different from the normal government announcements. Sometimes, yes, I do agree. In fact, that's what I covered in my presentation, as well as Ravi and FR made in their speech. Their discussion is that the implementation of the government scheme sometimes poses a challenge. And unless there is a very, very strong mandate from the government that you need to deliver it, then only it will become a reality. Probably, I see some of those government measures are kicking on at the ground level, but it need to give some time. But as Ravi and FR mentioned, I also echoed in one of my points that relying too much on the government at this point of time may not be a great idea. We need to find a way out by which we survive despite the government not supporting us. That's the way I look at it. Either you be frugal in your cost structure, you identify the way to increase your sales realization, way to see how best you can manage your supply chain. Some of the measures which you need to take, but reduce the reliance on the government in one way or the other. That's the way I look at it, Manoj.
Thank you, Sekar. Mr. Ravi, basically what he's saying is, it is not just India which has to become Atmanirbhar. Even data point services should become Atmanirbhar in some form. You try to survive as you can and let whatever support comes from the government be the icing on the cake. That's the message that Mr. Sekar is giving. The next question I'm taking, actually, it came in prior to this webinar, and 3 people apart who are anonymous have asked for a similar kind of question. Ravi, I would request you to take up this question. I run a 15-month-old startup in agribusiness, and a couple of them are in not agribusiness, which is as yet self-funded. I'm told that angel and VC funding is likely to be very difficult to raise in the current situation of COVID. I can clearly see ELOC through for another 6 to 12 months. Can you suggest what could be my approach to fundraising in the current pandemic situation? Ravi?
Yeah, so I think the one thing you could put in your calculus is that I think even the worst case scenario, you should plan that in 2 years, even if a vaccine doesn't come, that we would have figured out as mankind how to live with this vaccine, with this virus. Okay, let's assume that window, because if I say, for the next 10 years, we're all going to be in this situation, I don't think anybody can plan, and I have no suggestions for you, right? So let's assume it's 2 years is the outer limit of the time frame, and if we get lucky, we might be 1 year, right? And so in that year, between the 1 to 2 year time frame, what can you do that's useful? I think what you'll need to do is evidence points. You're in the early stage of your startup. I think start building up some way to evidence that what you have is valuable. Think through what the roadmap will look like over the next 3-4 years in terms of do more maybe product development now, keep it frugal, but make sure it's going to be high impact so that when you go to investors later, you will have a good, value prop to present them. Try and see if you can engage in especially the agri-tech. That's an area that's going to be needed. It's an essential for us to survive regardless of what's going on with the virus, right? Maybe I don't know what the company does, but maybe they're helping farmers go direct to market. Maybe they're helping with productivity. Maybe it's something to do with seed efficiency, right? If they are doing that, then start to keep building the product up, right? Make as much investment as you can in this period without, kind of raising up the cost, right? You may want to approach some HNIs, some angel investors who are like-minded. And I think there you may find folks are still willing to invest if they see a long-term approach to it, right? Institutional investment may be a little more difficult at this stage, I think. I would not want to suggest you go pitching 20 VCs and get fatigued because they all say, great plan, but we'll talk to you in 6 months when there's more certainty in the environment. So maybe you have to take a measured approach there, not fatigue yourself, but try and build something of value over the next few months, right? And then have kind of, when the window of opportunity comes, be ready to go out to market. That's the best guidance I can give you right now. If obviously you have something that, in spite of the environment, in spite of the current risks, will find a market, then double down. I think then you should go forward, not knowing the businesses these questions came from. I think then you should step on it. And there are some businesses like that, but I think for most, at least 80% of businesses, this is a hard environment, right? Going forward, not everybody has an alignment with COVID or a value prop in spite of the COVID crisis, right?
Yeah, thank you, Ravi. So Mr. Anish and the other three gentlemen who have written in, basically make your value proposition strong enough and compelling and stay afloat is a message from Ravi. The next question I'd like FR to take. This is from Mr. Sudhir Idukki from SI Modular. Would boycotting China-made products be the right way to deal with the tensed border situations currently? And I understand that there are customs norms kicking in to embargo imports from China. Would this be a viable option for a general consumer? Further, given a huge global anti-China sentiment, what are the chances that the beneficiary of this would be the Indian manufacturing industry? FR?
Yeah, so like I said in my earlier talk itself, that you have an opportunity with the sentiments from the government and others changing towards China product. But in reality, there'll be hardly, I would say, probably 5 to 10% of the products, which probably are low-hanging fruits which one could take. And if the government seriously works towards, that means they have to create the proper infrastructure, the environment for us to compete with China products. Quality is something that, like I said, we have to maintain. In India, we have this attitude of chalta attitude. We have a short-term attitude. Most of the MSMEs who have really taken a long-term view have ensured that the customers continue to be happy, engaged with them, and give them the best opportunities. They have grown because they have taken a long-term perspective. People who don't take a long-term perspective, look at immediate returns, try to compromise on quality, or even in working of the environment, things would definitely be challenged. So in China, they have created volumes. Why? Because they cater to the global market. Now that is a challenge that even if we optimize the cost with the help of the government reducing infrastructure costs, we maximize our cost optimization. Even then, because of the volume that we don't have, we would still have to be struggled. So we have to do better than that. And just say that China product is stopped, we start manufacturing toys. How many of the parents are going to buy those products from us? Because ultimately the sentiments of customers is he would like to have a good quality product at the lowest price. So there would be hardly, I would say, 5 to 10% low-hanging fruit which we can take immediately benefit. The medium term would be that we look at the products we are in, identify the imports happening from China, and see whether they're aligned to our current capacities, current facilities that we have, or they're just slightly different and we can incorporate them into our manufacturing and do it. The third would be that you get connected to the export customers who are importing from China, and they are the best bet to me, that can you get to approve you and your products and give you, because they are wanting to come to India. But this is not something that happened because of COVID. Even 2 years ago, with the discussion between US, China going negative, American companies have been trying to go out of China, or at least the new facilities that were creating wanted to be out of China. But what I know is hardly 10% of the companies have come to India. The majority of them come to Vietnam, Indonesia, and other countries. And that reason is that we are a huge country. We don't look at small sect of people. Everybody is put into the small same basket, whether it's a MSME or a multinational company. The procedures the methodology of the government officials is by and large the same. So that is a challenge. I have experience of 30 years ago when Motorola came in, the CEO was called to sales tax department to sign because he did not, was refusing to pay 2,000 rupees to the officer. He says, in China, I'm treated like a VIP. People will come, take my signature, I'm given a total VIP treatment. And after the work is over, the government puts up a proposal to the company, look, we need renovation of this school. Can you give $1 million? And the China will give. And who gets more credit? I as a CEO gets more elevated with the government. So I get super royal treatment. And here I'm sitting in sales tax office for 2 hours to make a signature because my company is not willing to pay 2,000 rupees. I don't know how the situations change, but this is what made China. I'm talking about 30-year-old story, and that is the reason why China is where China is today on global business, getting the business environment. They are really, truly, to a large extent, from what I know, they truly work as your partner. They believe that they have a stake in your company. They give you all the support, wherever necessary, and also have a good control over you. But in India, you have to fend for yourself. When you register, government then doesn't bother you at all. But when you don't follow, they come, and the environment has to change. So if you really want to catch on the opportunities created by China, we have to learn from China and as well as other European countries or American countries, how business people have to be treated in our country by the government and by others. Hey, you're on mute.
Manoj, you are on mute.
Thank you, Afar. Understand your perspective. At the end of the day, there is nothing to replace what is good product. A good product at good scale at a good price over the consumer needs. Just because there is a anti-China feeling, sentiments which are globally floating around, doesn't mean that we may become a beneficiary unless we are able to build a infrastructure and an entire ecosystem which is going to deliver good quality products at the good quality price at the best prices, with the consumer lapses. I think there won't be any replacement for success there. Thank you. More to the next question from Mr. Amartya Kini, AK Solutions. Ravi, I'd like you to take this. Do you see privatization in key sectors as a measure to encourage FDI getting impetus? I understand that recently government opened up the coal and the space ISRO sector to private players. Does this set a precedent to be followed? Ravi.
Yeah, so alongside coal, they also opened up atomic energy and a few other things in that same initiative, right? I think these are very long-term, long-term thinking, right? And I think I encourage it. And I think obviously, those are sectors there you must have both FDI plus collaborations, deep collaborations. Okay, none of these is, listen, even the Chinese didn't get where they are by just inventing everything from scratch. It's like they followed the Japanese model of bringing everything in there, making it better, then building your own technologies on top of that learning, right? And being able to go to the world. So I think we need to be very smart there too. There's a whole bunch of technologies that are going to drive the future, from AI to electric vehicles to battery technologies to atomic to space, and I think, coal of the, it's a different than all of those that I mentioned, but it's a source of fuel, right? And if we can make that much more efficient, and we have resources to tap into there's clearly an opportunity there too, if the government feels that they need to move forward there. But I think in all of those sectors that are much more longer, deeper technologies, we will have to open up for both private, public partnerships in some kind, academia and industry working together, being able to collaborate internationally, being able to license IP, and all of this, and then all of this has to have a long-term mindset. You can't if you look at the most valuable space company now, it's probably SpaceX, right? And what they're doing, even the rockets that return back, that are reusable, all of that, right? We should be thinking like that as we go forward. There's, and we've got several companies. I was on a panel discussion or roundtable discussion a few months ago, and on the space industry and the startups there are some very, very disruptive, very interesting startups being built out of India. And some of our capability in the government sector also in ISRO and others is very sophisticated and earned over many, many years of iterations, right? And so if we could unleash that potential, I think we would really benefit. And I think space is a area where lots of stuff is going to happen in nanotechnologies and materials. It's not just communications, and it's not necessarily exploring outer space. That may or may not be financially viable, but there are a lot of things that impact us here on the ground, all the way from sensing technology, weather predictions, all kinds of things, right? That are now being done at the nano level, literally above the city, above each area. Think of it like drones that are flying a few miles up in the sky, right? And able to use their sensors. So just that, I think the government needs to really encourage that. Otherwise, we'll be spending billions and billions buying it from others, and we will be subject to cyber attack also potentially, right? Which is somebody might turn off all our sensors just when we need them the most. And so again, coming back to self-reliance, we've got the talent, we've got the academic institutions. We need to have a investment and a long-term mindset, and a mindset of not just I need to build it only in-house, because all this you can't build only in-house. You have to find a way to source intelligently, think like Israel does, act like China does at the scale China does with the intelligence Israel has, and India has all the other ingredients that can give us a beautiful fusion of that, right? If we can move forward.
Yeah, thank you, Ravi. I understand this. At the end of the day, any privatization effect and efforts will always be in terms of long term, and I'm sure the government is looking at multiple ways of looking at opening up more and more sectors. Overall, it's for the good for the industry. I would like to take the next question to FR. This is a little on the borderline line, but FR, since you have a lot of experience in conservation and work in that area, I'll take this question. The whole world is talking about the COVID and the related pandemic. An NGO working in a field, this is from an NGO working in a field of biodiversity. The whole world is talking about pandemic. No one seems to be thinking about the cause of this virus. Eventually, if we don't conserve biodiversity in this planet, many more such pandemics will continue to come. Should the government measures not direct their energies to ensure that people who benefit from the schemes, including the MSME schemes or whatever schemes are being announced, should adhere to certain eco and biodiversity conservation aspects of their businesses in whatever small manner they can? Any views, FR?
Difficult to really comment on this, but I would say that the word used that no one seems to be thinking would be wrong. I think if you look at the world today to a world, say 30 years ago or 40 years ago, there is a whole lot of consensus, intentions, efforts that have gone in bringing back the nature. Whether it's happening, being implemented, people are really following what they're discussing is another matter. But 30 years ago, nobody gave a thought to this. Everybody in Bangalore were just, who gave a thought when Bangalore bus stand, the biggest tank, Subhash tank, became a bus stand. So things were happening that everything was being destroyed. Today, at least we are talking about no further destruction, and whatever, like the number of lakes that were closed in Bangalore, a lot of them are getting rejuvenated. So even at the global level, barring Trump talking about carbon particles, all that is not necessary. But otherwise, the rest of the world, including the American companies, came very strongly against the sentiments expressed by Trump. So this is happening, but yes, compliance, asking government to put in legislation, compliance, all this, to me, really doesn't work. At individual level, let us see what you can do, influence others, influence government. We have enough plethora of laws as it is, even for business and other purposes. How many laws get really truly followed? How many laws really get regulated? The ultimate outcome is achieved. Like today, take the example of dues. There are enough provision in the law to send a person who has given a post-dated check to go to jail if the check gets dishonored. But how many cases have happened that the people have been sent to jail when there's a very clear legislation available? So in India, the problem is not creating regulation. Government does it, almost every day when the new law comes in. It is a question of regulation. And so bringing in law is fine, but will it be getting regulated? I have my own doubts. I think NGOs like yours have to continue to work, put in efforts. All I'm saying is, please don't go with a negative attitude. If you read the mother, Aurobindo's mother, she would say that even environmentalists, when they talk negative about the world, they create a negative aura. You want to change the environment, talk positive of everybody, create a positive way that people start getting into that positive mode and start helping out your objective. So keep a very positive attitude towards governments, others who are not following biodiversity like you. Create a relationship so that they will start listening to you more. More you attack, you get more away from the objective. So like we developed a lake where the government just gave us a letter. We didn't even go for it. We went to the villages. They had encroached lands. And can you imagine in Bomasandra where a land cost about 4 crores? By talking to the landowners, we were able to release 17 acres of encroached land before developing the land. So you have to go with a very positive attitude that land that we acquired, we put in 60,000 trees. They're the biggest Miyawaki forest in Karnataka. All that happened is we had that positive outlook. We just went along with people, try to convince them, make them understand. So that is what I would do, rather than regulations.
Yeah, thank you, FR. I think, keeping positivity in mind is a very important parameter, specifically when it comes to when you want to be the change, that you want to see. Please start it with a lot of positivity. Mr. Anand and Mr. Francis Jacob, your questions have already been covered in the address, so I'm skipping it, though you have given it. There are a couple of more questions which I'd like to take up before we sort of come to a closure. Sekar, this is for you. How do we ensure, this is an anonymous one and Mr. Santosh, how do we ensure rural MSMEs receive part of the capital infused if they are outside the banking system? And if an MSME stamped NPA in 2017, is it still eligible for benefits?
Okay. As far as, let me take the second question first, and then I'll go to the first question. In the MSME, in the recent provisions, what they've given a relaxation is only for the current year dues, where they said it will not be counted for NPAs, whereas the old dues, which are considered as an NPA, are still as an NPA. But however, the banks are still giving loans for the MSMEs, though it is an NPA under some other schemes are there. So probably they can look at it, they can talk to some of the nationalized banks, and still some banks are willing to help as long as there's MSMEs are viable. And even if there's a stress to fund what the government has come out, probably you can look at it. We can still go for that. So I would not say the revival is ruled out. The last option for you is to look at some of the NBFCs who can help you to revive the MSME as long as your business model is right. The more important for the MSME is not about the funding or anything. Please relook at a business model and make sure the business model is successful. Definitely the chances of revival is very high. As far as the first question is concerned, the rural MSMEs, it is a challenge as far as the rural MSMEs are concerned. The nationalized banks, as per what I understand, the mandate given by the RBI to the bankers is that please extend all the help to the rural MSMEs. So probably the rural MSMEs should approach the bankers. There are certain microfinancing institutions which the government is pushing forward, and some of those microfinance institutions are coming up in the rural areas. So probably some of the rural MSMEs need to approach the microfinancing institutions, MFIs, which can help you to revive it. That's all I can give a limited answer at this point of time. Probably if I have more details, I can see how best I can support.
Yeah, Sekar, thank you for this. A quick rejoinder to that question is about two people have written in saying that there are announcements for the benefits for the banks. On the ground level, the banks are saying that there is no government order. How long is it likely to take? And is this the discretion of the branch, the bank? I mean, is there a discretionary aspect involved?
Okay.
This is from Mr. Manjesh. This is from Mr. Manjesh, Mr. Arun, and Mr. Anil.
This is a very practical question. Let me explain to you, Manoj. There are 3 C's are available. There are 3 C's have to be challenging. The first C is CBI. The second C is the central vigilance. The third C is the chief manager or the chief GM of the respective bank. The challenge is that though the government is pushing the reforms or 3 lakh crores, some of the banks, PSBs, and let me take the 2 public sector banks and the private banks. The public sector banks are not willing to take the risk because of multiple factors. Though the fear of NPAs is different, but the public sector banks are not willing to take the risk because amount goes bad. And there is always a challenge on the part of the banks that the moment their loan becomes bad, they get all the notices, actions from the higher officials. So to the extent there's a fear factor. As far as the private banks are concerned, yes, they don't want to, their good money to go after the bad money. That is one of the reasons why the private banks are not going to. That's what I said. I went back to the UK Senior Committee, what it recommended. So you have a challenges. There's no government order, though there is a request given by All India MSME Association, and a lot of organizations have made a representation to the Reserve Bank of India that make MSME not only a priority sector, because MSME priority sector lending is hardly 15%. They wanted to increase MSME priority sector lending at least to 30% by the current year, and make sure that all the banks adhere to the requirement or quantum of the MSME priority sector lending. If that happens, some of those challenges can get addressed. It's a very practical issue, if you are right in the saying that, Manoj.
Thank you, Sekar. I'm just taking the last two questions because we have taken the time for granted from our panelists. We have exceeded our timeline. Thank you, gentlemen, for being present. Last two questions from the audience. There are a few a bit repetitive, and the rest of them we will try to get the answers from the panelists and give it to you on email. This is, I would again request FR to take it from Mr. Stephen. Since you have given a lot of practical examples of how there can be benefits to the MSME sector, enforcing the 45-day payment for supplies made by MSME to the customers is a big challenge. Are there any practical ways of making it enforceable?
Very difficult because it.
I think Stephen thought that you're a very practical person, FR.
Yeah, so practical answer. So what I would do is, I mean, majority of the people in the corporate world have to now report it in their balance sheet in annual accounts. So, and the things are becoming definitely more and more being questioned by SEBI and others. So as far as listed companies are concerned, I think the choice for them not to pay the money is reduced. In the last 2 years, government also has taken actions to see that separate accounts are being done and you're supposed to provide details. Thirdly, even the banking system is changed. I've got lots of bankers coming to me and saying, we will open an account where you deposit the money. We'll also give lending to the MSME sector based on the bills. So I would say things are at the private level, definitely things are better. And more than that, see, you have to look at your growth factor. You're running the industry. You should look at that if you're in a very competitive environment where there are lots of competitors, your product is easy to make, your life is going to be difficult. So you have to get into a strategic situation where the customer needs you. Survive. A lot of MSMEs are going to survive in this pandemic because of even despite they don't have liquidity, they don't have banks giving them the extra limit. The customer will take care of you because without your supplies, he will not be able to supply. So, if you are in that strategic situation, you're safe, you will get the money payment. And third is, I would say, you look at your customer and see how is he one-sided or two-sided. If he's one-sided, looking only his benefit all the time, it's time that you start looking at how to de-risk that. Otherwise, build up your relation with customers and that works very well. In auto sector, let me tell you that it's a very high disciplined industry. I can make my cash flow for next the 60 days because my customer says I will pay on so and so time, the money comes. Even in epidemic, the customers not only paid on time, some of the customers paid in advance, but they also took an undertaking that we will also pay to our suppliers in time. Now, majority of us follow this rule even before COVID, like we would follow the same principle that customer follows with us. But unfortunately, some of them don't. And it creates the entire ecosystem changes. So I would say that definitely it's possible. And secondly, otherwise you have to look at recourse to law. And definitely it is more favorable to you. But how it's regulation, getting a customer complaining on customer, losing your business. These are the factors you have to consider it. But if a customer is one-sided, please look at alternate customers in the long term.
Thanks, FR. Stephen, what FR is saying is make your product a valuable product for the customer, and I'm sure your payments will come in time. And if the customer is a generic problematic customer, look for some other customer. I'm taking the last question for today's session, and this I would request Ravi to take. I think this is from an investor from Mr. Srinivas. He says, I'm an investor along with my friends in an unmanned 24/7 retail startup at Bangalore. I want to understand what I should do with respect to my tax filings for both being eligible for long-term and short-term capital gain taxes.
I'm going to defer that question, the tax part of it, to Sekar. But I think,
okay.
The concept I think is a good one, right? The unmanned store, because if especially they can figure out how to disinfect the store and basically a big vending machine that is viewed as safe as a delivery mechanism for goods. I think maybe the time has come for that kind of product, right? It's a little bit like Amazon's Go Store here in India. I think this is the kind of thing we need to start thinking about to resuscitate retail, in the retail environment. So I'll let Sekar go.
I see Ravi is excited. Ravi is excited to what it looks like.
I empathize with the business model. I think it's a good forward-looking one, and I want to encourage them to keep going.
Before Sekar gives the answer to Srinivas' question, maybe I can give an advice to Srinivas. Mr. Srinivas, maybe you should connect to Ravi.
And he's lucky to get capital gains right now. Everybody's in losses.
The question is how to get the benefit of long term and the short term. What is his point? Manoj?
Yeah, what should I do with respect to my tax filings for being eligible for long term and short term capital gains? He's a startup and he's an investor himself.
There's nothing to do. You need to hold it for the minimum period as specified in the law, and in the return you need to disclose it how long you have been holding it. And as far as the startup is concerned, there are certain advantages that you got of a startup. So to my mind, if you're holding it for the minimum number of period, 2 years or 3 years, and depending upon what company it is, you should be able to get a benefit. I don't think you need to get worried about the filings, and it's only a compliance issue, not a problem.
And Manoj, if I can just add, sometimes investors make the investment informally, like a loan or an advance or something with the expectation they'll convert later. I think there you need to formalize it, file it, and disclose it, right, in your filings to be able to benefit. Because the date you first report, you can't go backwards and retro, fit the date later. So make the filing with the next tax return.
It depends upon what sort of investment it is. If it is an investment in the equity share, you are eligible to get right from the day one the period starts. If it is a loan, get converted into the equity. Then depending upon the terms of the agreement, you get it. But as long as you're holding that instrument for a minimum number of 30, you should get the benefit.
Yeah. So, Mr. Srinivas, I hope your question is answered. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been surely a very interesting experience for me to moderate this session with three amazingly knowledgeable panelists. Thank you, FR. Thank you, Sekar, and thank you, Ravi, for having spared your time for us with your immense knowledge and your insights shared. Before I conclude this engaging session, I'd like to share a small anecdote with you. This is a story about a 10-year-old Japanese boy called Chocho, who lost his left arm in a devastating car accident much early in life, and he decides to go and study judo. And what happens is he goes to his master, who starts training him for judo. And after 2-3 months, Chocho goes to his master and says, "Master, you have just told me one move. I mean, the same move I'm practicing over and over again. Shouldn't I learn some other moves?" And the master says, "No, buddy, just go on, learn this. And I'm telling you, I know what is good for you." So he keeps learning that. After 3 months or so, master says, "Now I think you're ready for a tournament." And Chocho goes and enters a tournament along with his master. First round, he somehow wins. Second round, he somehow wins easily. In the third round, his opponent is a little more, established player. But the match goes on, and somewhere down the line, the opponent loses guard, maybe loses his concentration or something, and Chocho pins him down with the only move he knows, and he wins that match again. And he goes into the finals. And in the finals, actually, what happens is that there's a massive, huge opponent that he's got, comes from a pedigree guy, previous year winner. This guy is a small little 10-year-old boy. And again, the same thing happens. The match goes on. And then after a lot of intense, tackles and stuff like that, one fine occasion, he gets an opportunity and he pins him down in the only move he knows. And then he wins the match again. And then when he's coming back, he asks his master, "Master, you just taught me one move. How is it that, I won as a champion and came out?" He says, "There are 2 reasons, Chocho. One is that you near mastered the art of that particular move. You almost become a master at that move. And number two, the only known defense for a guy who gets pinned against that move is to grab your left arm, which you don't have. So what was actually Chocho's biggest weakness? He very successfully, the master helped him convert into his strength. All of us have our own handicaps in some form or the other, more so in these tumultuous times. Businesses are down, cash flows are tight, customers are not paying, opportunities are looking bleak, liquidity is in a serious mess. There seem to be not just these, many more handicaps that we are living with every day, especially the business owners. The question we all have to ask ourselves is whether we are going to rule over this handicap, or like that little Chocho who mastered the only move that was needed to become a victor, come out as victor. The little boy had a great master who taught him that one single lesson he had to learn. In the last hour and a half, we have had opportunity of interacting with three masters who have shared their views and wisdom. We have to learn from such luminaries, learn more from their words of wisdom, and learn that one single move which can help us attain victory. It is just possibly one step away. So ladies and gentlemen, keep searching, since we can find success if we all set our minds to it. Once again, a big thank you to all three speakers, Sekar, FR, and Ravi. Indeed, I'm indebted to you for the time spent with us. I'm sure that all the attendees have benefited as much as I have personally. And to you all attendees, a heartfelt thanks for logging in. It's your presence here that makes the event a success and makes us feel that all the efforts where we put in for the webinars like this are worthwhile eventually. Really appreciate your attendance and support. Please share your feedbacks on email, or you can call us or send us WhatsApp so that we can improve the event as we continue to launch our series of #ExpertsTalk. Please feel free to reach out to me either at manoj@noveloffice.in or 98450-64756. I repeat, 98450-64756, or to any of the numbers that Novel Office has contacted you during a registration process. As we all know, the traditional handshake way of greeting while meeting and leaving is changed now to the more traditional Indian namaste. So till we come back for more future webinars, allow me to close the session with the traditional Indian Shukriya, Karam, Mehrbani, and an even more traditional Namma Bangalore Namaskara. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Namaskara. Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ravi like to get